We have Jerry Bergman. He is from Ohio. He's a member of, he's a board member of Creation Research Society and has been for a number of years. I regard him as the most prolific writer in the area of creation. He's got 20 books, at least 20 books, right? Worked on a few more. Most of them you see on the back table there. But this evening he's going to speak on this, his large book that you saw out there on apes as ancestors. Jerry has taught for 40 plus years in universities, Christian schools, and churches all over. And he's widely published with a lot of technical articles, not just in the creation technical journals, but also in secular journals. So he's a very accomplished speaker, and we look forward to hearing from him this evening. Jerry?
Thank you very much. Is my mic working?
I think you go.
You're working.
Oh.
I'm working? Okay, good. Talking about apes as ancestors, let me try to introduce what I'm talking about and why. And I'm just reading this book, Human Errors. This is Nathaniel Lentz. He is a rabid evolutionist, strongly believes in evolution, and is very active in trying to prove that our worldview is wrong. And one of his main arguments is, you can see the picture here, that we have all kinds of errors. Your body is falling apart. And I'll read one comment here. Nathaniel Lentz explains the human body as one big pile of evolutionary compromises. But even our most egregious imperfections are a testament to the greatness of our species. But humans have accumulated so many design flaws, Lentz shows, because we are very, very good at getting around them. So you have all kinds of flaws in your body, is what he's having to say. And therefore, I wrote a whole book on that, which is called Poor Design. And I show all these claimed flaws are not flaws at all, that you indeed are really, really well designed. And if you don't believe me, study medicine or study anatomy and physiology, and you will learn that the body is incredibly well designed. I remember one lecture I had at the medical school when I was a student there of the hyoid bone. Hyoid bone is a little U-shaped bone right around here. And we had a half-an-hour lecture on the hyoid bone. Half an hour. And the professor closed by saying, really is quite amazing, even though it's just one simple bone, which is freestanding. It's not connected to any other bone. But after he was done, he said, I don't know who designed this bone, but he sure did a good job. Genius. And I thought, that's about one of the simplest bones in our body, and yet we got a good half-an-hour sermon, actually, on the hyoid bone. And he did a very good job showing, indeed, how well-designed we are. So that's Poor Design. And that's, by the way, it's the only book ever published by anybody, anywhere, that covers this subject. And this the third venue I've spoken at, and the first two, I've sold out 5 titles, and I have only 1 left of 3 more titles. So hopefully I'll have enough so I can go to the next venue, but just, if you buy them all, that's all right, I guess. I'll let the next venue worry about it. And the next book is Useless Organs. This is important to me because I was at one time an evolutionist, and I thought the easiest thing to try to refute, if it was true or not, was to determine from the medical literature whether or not all of these claims of useless organs really were true. Are these organs really useless, or do they have a function? And I started out with about 100 of them, and I did research in the medical literature and found that all of them have an important use. The appendix is a good example of a famous organ that is believed to have no function, and the appendix has 5 different functions. So to say it's useless is, it's like saying your front tire is useless. Just sits there, doesn't do anything. Well, good luck going places with a front tire that's not there. That's going to be a problem, a big problem. But he did make some interesting statements in this book, which I will read a couple for you. Let's see. This one should be good to start. Talks about flaws in humans, and he says how humans became so much more intelligent than our closest relatives, the apes, in such a short time is one of the biggest mysteries of evolution. So it has a whole book trying to show you how true evolution is, and yet one of the most important things, namely the difference between us and apes in intelligence, is one of the biggest mysteries of evolution. And that's basically what I will be talking about in a few minutes. And then one other statement, if I can find it here. I should have marked these. I think they fell out my markers, but anyways, here it is. What he says is, he's talking about cancer. And cancer is a result of mutations. That's what causes cancer, mutations, period. Okay, and then he says, quote, everything great that evolution ever brought was due to mutations. In other words, and he defines what they are. They're random copying errors. So you are the result of, according to this professor of biology, you are the result of, well, everything about you is a result of mutations. 99% which are harmful or near neutral. They're not lethal, but they eventually pile up and they kill you. So you are the result of billions of mistakes. Next time you, well, maybe you better not do this, but next time you look at your spouse, say, honey, you're the result of billions of mistakes. You may not, I guess you shouldn't do that, but that's what they teach, that you're the result of billions of mistakes. And therefore, well, that's a problem, I think. And one thing I've always been interested in is the fossil record, and I have several books. This is called Fossil Forensics, and there's a few of these left, so I'm fortunate there is a few left. And what I show is that the fossil record for fish, for birds, for amphibians, for reptiles, for snakes is not there. The experts admit we have no evidence of the evolution of snakes, of birds, of fish, etc. And I show that the literature is very clear that we have no fossil evidence for evolution for any creature, period. And my last book just came out, and so it's just about 3 weeks ago, or two and a half weeks ago it came out, The 3 Pillars of Evolution Demolished. And I show that the foundation for evolution is the 3 pillars, namely mutations, we just talked about, and natural selection, and abiogenesis, the origin of life. And I show clearly that the evidence for these 3 pillars of evolution is vacuous. So this book is an evolution killer. And it's the only book in this area, by the way. This is the only book in this area. And the only book in human fossils is this one, Apes as Ancestors. And it's kind of a big book and lots of references, thousands of references. And basically what we did is we found fossil claims for human evolution, and then we looked at the critics of those claims. For example, I have my theory of human evolution and my fossils that I like, and Australopithecus afarensis and so on. And then you criticize, other paleontologists criticize it and find lots of flaws. But I still say my theory is the best. Okay? Then your theory, I evaluate it, I look at the problems, and I conclude your theory doesn't work. But you are still convinced that your theory is the best. And so basically in writing this book, all we did is look at the literature, the peer-reviewed literature, and found indeed that paleontologists criticizing each other, in essence, they demolished the evidence for apes as ancestors. Just look at the literature. I don't think I quoted any creationist in this book at all. They're all well-known PhD level paleontologists is what we use to show indeed what's going on. And to reiterate the importance, I like the film clip that you showed, but to reiterate the importance of this, I'm a Methodist pastor, and we are undergoing a mammoth split in the church. And it's really causing, the Methodist Church was the largest Protestant denomination in the United States for generations. And whether it will survive in the next few years is questionable. What is the argument? The main concern is evolution and the issue of homosexuality. It's the main things that they're arguing about. And the problem is, as I will present, the evidence against human evolution and evolution period is absolutely, unequivocally overwhelming. It's not an argument. If I was to say here, I'm from Mars, I was teleported from Mars, you would say, what? Are you okay? Are you on some medication or what's going on? Well, it's proven that I was teleported from Mars. Well, that's ridiculous. Do you have any proof? Well, no, but just believe me. Take it on faith. And in essence, with evolution, you have to take it on faith. And a good example I use in this PowerPoint presentation is the most famous, the most respected, the most documented evidence for human evolution is our friend called Lucy, which may be a male or female, we don't know what sex. We don't have enough of the bones to figure out what sex it was. They call her Lucy because when they were digging her bones out of the ground, Lucy in the Sky by the Beatles was playing. So that's why she got the name Lucy. So we don't know whether she's a male or female, and some of the statues of Lucy show her to be a her, others show her to be a him. So if we can't even tell what sex it is, we have a problem. Okay, moving on. Now let's see if this works there. Okay. Genesis 1:27, God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. King James Version Bible. I do a lot of work in Baptist churches, and they kind of like us to use the King James Bible. There's some modern versions they don't appreciate, so that's fine. I grew up in the King James Bible, so I have no problems at all with it. But kind of wording which is a little bit different than we're used to. But anyways, you see the point. The point is that God created male and female in the image of God. And that's pretty clear. Other scriptures as well, but you get the idea. And that is the book here, which I am reviewing one chapter. And is there a debate about this? Well, this is a Christianity Today article, The Search for the Historical Adam. And Christianity Today basically is saying that there's a lot of debate on whether or not we are descendants of Adam and Eve, or whether or not we evolved. Among pastors, in churches, the Methodist Church. That's a lot of Methodist ministers that are convinced, not because they personally know the evidence, but they're convinced indeed that we evolved. Because why? All the evolutionists believe it. It's fact, and therefore it must be true. Well, let's look at the evidence and see. And there is Lucy, and you can see from those two models how different they are. And these are at the university, I think the one on the left, or the right, pardon me, is the one at the University of Chicago, the Field Museum of Natural History. And there are probably 50 different models of Lucy in the country, showing indeed this is the best example of human evolution. So when you're looking at this question, why not look at the best example? I mean, that makes sense, and that's what I'm doing. How many people reject it? Well, you might find this interesting in that the religion that, now there's not every denomination here, but these are the ones they looked at, the religion that the greatest number of people reject human evolution is the Jehovah's Witnesses. 92% of Jehovah's Witnesses do not accept human evolution. It's number one. Number two is Mormons. Interesting, you're having a Mormon speaker here shortly. But of the ex-Mormon, of the Mormons, 88%. 78. Can't see it from here. 78% accept that we were created by Adam and Eve. So among the Mormons, at least, most of them believe that we were created by God. Evangelical Protestants, and I assume that would be this church, Evangelical Protestants, where are we at? Can you read that? 76, okay. The next one is historical black Protestant churches, and that would be 62. Okay. By the way, one reason historical black churches do not accept the evolutionary viewpoint, because if you look in the textbooks, and I've collected many of these, and they prove evolution by showing an ape, a Negro, and a white. And when you show that in, well, many black are aware of that, because they, yeah, when I was with one grandmother who was 90-something, she said, yeah, I remember in school we had studied biology, and they had a ape, Negro, and I'm a Negro, and then whites. That's not very nice. She was not very happy, and she had a hard time with evolution ever since then. And so I didn't have to convince her, she already was convinced that what I'm saying was true. And then Muslims, and that'd be what, 55? Mainline Protestant would be the mainline Lutherans, the mainline Methodists, the mainline Episcopalians would be what? 49. Orthodox, like Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, it would be what? 46. Catholic, 40, what, 42? Okay, and then unaffiliated, which now it's expected, and then Jewish, and then Hindu, and then Buddhist. So pretty much unaffiliated Jewish, Hindu, and Buddhist pretty much reject the creation of Adam and Eve and accept the evolutionary idea. By the way, I find that my writing is very popular in the Muslim world. I have a number of books. In fact, I have probably 10 books published in Arabic, and it does quite well in the Muslim world. Moving on. Now, just in case you're not clear, I wanted to show you the difference, just so you had it clearly in your mind. This person right here is an ape. Okay, got that? On the left. On the right is a person, a human, a white, in this case, person. Okay, see, there's a difference. No question. And I will show you a few other pictures which show the same thing. And then when we look at creationists, there's a lot of disagreement in creationists whether or not certain fossils are human or ape. So among creationists, and that's one reason we did the book, because I had a PhD level scientist, an anatomist, did a lot of the chapters, and he carefully evaluated the research and found which were actually humans, because there are some humans that look, I hate to say this, but don't look around when I say this. There are some humans that look like apes. Okay? There are not many, but there's a few. So that can be a problem. And these are among the many books. Lucy, The Beginnings of Humankind. A fascinating story. Lucy herself is stunning. The Beginnings of Humankind. One of many, many books which basically highlight Lucy. Now, what have we found of Lucy? Well, if you look here, you can see that what is brown is what we found. So you can see the majority of the skeleton is white, which means we found about only 20% of the skeleton. And so making judgments from 20% of the skeleton, that's difficult, because most of it's gone. And yet it's one of the most complete Australopithecines ever found, which is interesting. And you have on the average, 207 bones, and 47 are what we found in Lucy. And they're not 47 bones, they're 47 parts of bones. In fact, there's only one or two bones, the femur, I think, and one or another bone, which is complete. And the question is, was Lucy an ape, a human, or an ape man? And this is a picture which illustrates, again, you can see that you can fit pretty well into the monkey scenario. The bones again are brown, pretty much in the monkey scenario and pretty much in the human scenario. So really, judging by the bones, it's hard to determine definitively whether or not those bone fragments are of a human or of a ape. And it's by far the most famous pre-human fossil ever discovered. Technically, it's called Australopithecus afarensis. And it's based on bones found in Ethiopia. And again, we know not much based on the bones alone. And that's all we have. That's all we have. It's widely portrayed as the best example of a missing link ever. And so therefore, I decided to look at this particular example. Now, one of the ways of trying to show that it was human was some footprints. In 1976, they found a number of hominin footprints in Laetoli, which is a part of northeastern Tanzania. And they dated by evolutionists as close to 500,000 years older than Lucy. And so there's a debate on the debate of these are the footprints. They dated older than Lucy. The footprints, though, were dated not by the footprints. You can't date footprints. You can date the ash they're found in and the volcanic ash they're found in. They date as 500,000 years older than Lucy. The problem with that is that the footprints may be 10 million years old, and I may walk on them last week, and that doesn't mean that those footprints were made last week. So that's a problem. And I'll show you a lot of problems as we go through this. One thing you need to look at is the difference between a human foot and an ape foot. And you can see dynamic differences, namely that actually apes have 4 hands. And they have that so they can climb trees. And they climb trees really well. If you've been to Africa, you can see they just zip right up those trees as fast as a squirrel. And humans only have 2 hands, so it's a lot harder for us to climb a tree because most of the climbing work is done with our hands, and then we try to brace ourselves with our feet, but that's not real easily done. And that is an example of the footprint. And now, which do you think fits in that footprint? The ape foot or the human foot? The human foot. And therefore, I conclude they're not ape feet at all. They're simply human feet. In fact, some of the traditions where these were found say that humans walked in this area. Yes, my grandfather walked in this area, and he made the footprints. Now, you can't verify that, but that may be the case. And there you can see the examples of the footprints. There are quite a few, and I just showed you the best of them. And there you can see the evolutionists like to show a family, they're family men, I guess, a family of mom, dad, and baby walking through the ash there making the footprints. And you'll notice some modern animals, giraffe and so on, and they found, by the way, by these footprints, modern animals, which again argues that they were not made millions of years ago, as they claim. So they have 69 prints, 31 large, 38 smaller footprints. So they assume 2 adults and a child. And they're found about 1,000 miles from the Lucy bones. So, well, probably aren't Lucy's because they're found so far away. And then they're likely, I believe, human footprints. And statements of people who saw them say, if you saw some footprints on a beach, they would look just like these footprints found in volcanic ash. And so to me, it's pretty clear they're human footprints. But of course, if you're an evolutionist, you see the world through evolutionary glasses. And the main problem we're trying to overcome is once people wear those evolutionary glasses, they see the world through those glasses, and they just can't see the world for what it is. When I show this PowerPoint in classes with 3rd graders, I ask the 3rd graders to figure out, who made those footprints? Well, a modern man. Any doubt in your mind? No, I can see it's pretty clear. Modern people walking around. And as I mentioned, there are hundreds of footprints belonging to modern mammals. And so therefore, that indicates they are modern people. Prints of local people, that's the theory. And then they found some more prints. They found quite a few prints. And that only blurred the conclusion. It didn't help solve the problem with who they were. Now look at Lucy herself, and I'll just assume she's a she. But again, we don't know. And of course, they don't show a she there. But you can see Lucy next to a modern person. And Lucy was about 3'5" to 4 feet tall. Lucy was quite small, about the size of a chimp, which again is evidence that she was a chimp and not the size of a modern human. Now when we look at the skull, of course is pretty important because we can determine intelligence, brain size from the skull. What they found is the brown. So you can see there's a lot missing. In fact, 90% of the skull is missing. Some things that to me say it was not a human, but a chimp is right. If I get this thing to work. Oh, there. That looks like it is part of a chimp or an ape and not a human. And then when they draw from those bones, and you can see there's a lot of artistic interpretation, and when you look at that, you can see that, well, there's certainly similarities, but on the other hand, there's a lot of differences between what you end up drawing and what is actually there. The nose, for example, all of these, they have no evidence of a nose, and so therefore that's totally artistic license to produce the nose. And then when we look at how apes locomote, and this you can see here, and then they have the bones printed on an ape, and you can see they fit pretty well. And here again we have another example of that. And we have other so-called relatives, human-ape relatives, and so you can see in some cases we have much more, at least for the skull, than we do for Lucy. So in short, to try to summarize where I'm going, we've got an ape, a chimp, and then we have a modern human, and we have no missing links. And not there. And that's what, of course, my book documents. And when we look at the skulls, that's clearer. We can see a human skull here and an ape skull here. Enormous differences. And I will talk about a few in a minute. And there we can see Australopithecines, our apes, and you can see other examples, some primates, and Australopithecus and Homo sapiens. You can clearly see the difference between Homo sapiens and the other apes. Major differences, which is pretty obvious. Walking upright, we can see that the posture is very different, and as a result, other things have to be different as well. If you spent your life on all four, you would have to have a different position for your neck and the spinal cord going into your neck. Here, there's really not comfortable either way. This is not stable either way. And this right here, of course, is how humans walk upright. And there you can see drawings, the ape. You can see where the spinal cord vertebrae go into, right here. And then you can see human, where they go into. And then another picture is for a orangutan. You can see how it's toward the occipital, the back part. And then a male gorilla, a female gorilla, a chimp, and a human. Human, you can't even see this foramen magnum, this hole where the vertebra goes into. Can't even see it. So we had to get another picture so you can see it. And there it is. Now you can see it. Again, very much toward the back, the occipital area. Again, again, again. And humans, very much in the center. And so when you're looking at the bones, it helps to have this data so that you can determine where this foramen magnum is. And with Lucy, we don't have it. With many of the skulls, we don't have it. Brain size difference, a human here and a chimp here. 1,378 grams here. A chimp, on the average, 399. So a major difference in the size of the brain, thus in the size of the skull. Huge difference. And there, when we look at that difference in a chart, here's a human, and here's all the primates. Mammoth difference. And where is Lucy? From what we know, right about here. And another example of the same thing. And then walking, of course, if you spent too much time on all fours, you would probably get dizzy. Wouldn't work right, because the internal ear for an ape is designed differently than the internal ear for you, because the ape spends almost his entire life walking on all fours. They can walk occasionally on two, but that's not the normal mode of walking. Other differences which you may not notice. This, by the way, when I present this, is what people find among the most interesting results. Apes, there's no whites of the eyes, so you can't tell if they're looking at you. You can't. Humans, you've got the whites of the eyes, and as a result, you can tell pretty clearly if they're looking at you. And there's one exception, I guess, but there's no primate that has the whites of the eyes. Why do we have the whites of the eyes? I think the only reason we have whites in the eye is because God said, you know, it'd be really nice to know if somebody's looking at you or looking somewhere else, especially if you're a mother or a teacher. And so therefore, I think that's the reason. May not be right, but, you know, I think that's a good reason. And there you can see the walking difference in the hips, human right here. And you can see enormous difference. And we don't have enough of Lucy's hips to determine whether or not this is the case or this is the case. But we have indications that seems to be this is the case, but then they're broken, and therefore you can tell for sure. And again, you can see the difference. And you can see how much longer this is for the ape than for us. And there you can see the human hips are shorter, the curved iliac blades, so the gluteus medius can attach to it's a muscle system, the gluteus medius, minimus, and maximus, so they can be attached for upright walking. And therefore, that is an important means of being able to walk upright. So the design to walk upright is in many parts, the ear, the hips, and other parts. And there you can see again the difference in walking. And the arm length is something else I can mention. The arm of a chimp, and all apes, is much, much longer. You can see our arm, when we put it to the side, goes pretty much past the hips, but not too far past that. The ape, you can see, is quite different. And besides that, the chimp and the gorilla, they walk on their fingers like this. And humans, of course, do not walk that way, and therefore the fingers are designed quite differently. And looking at the finger, we can see from Lucy's species, it's curved. Humans, I'm trying to think of what that is. They're not curved. That part of the finger, it's not curved in humans. It's straight. And there's some more examples. Okay, so this is the fourth metatarsal. That's what I thought. The fourth metatarsal in the hand, and you can see the difference between humans and Homo sapiens, and then this would be Lucy. And you can see Lucy is, from what they have left of it, you can see Lucy is similar to gorillas and other apes. And now looking at the feet in more detail, you can see that all of the ape feet look like, well, an ape. All of them. One difference is man. Different from all the other apes. It's interesting, these are all the same, or close, similar. Only man is different. And that's because these guys all climb trees, and we don't normally climb trees. So that's why there is a difference. And now the latest theory relative to the bones of Lucy is, and I didn't, this is a scientist came up with this. What happened to Lucy is she fell out of a tree. And looking at the bones, you take a forensic anthropologist looking at the bones and the break fits falling this way out of a tree. That's what it appears to be. That indicates that Lucy is a monkey and lived not that long ago. And now we have movies, films. This is a Max original about Lucy the human chimp. This is actually about this woman here who works with chimps, but it does get into Lucy a little bit. And that's the last slide. Let me try to summarize. I could spend a lot more time. In fact, when I talk about the 98% claim that we're 98% similar to chimps, when I talk about that, I'll go into this in more detail. But there's overwhelming evidence that Lucy was a chimp. And some paleontologists agree. You know, there's a lot of literature done by professional paleontologists that say, nope, Lucy was nothing more than a chimp. She was not a missing link, period, not at all. And so therefore, it's not just us. But of course, if you really believe in evolution, if you're a true believer, you see what we want to, you see what you want to see. So we take some questions now, or somebody maybe could give me some water would be helpful. My throat's giving out. I was in Indianapolis 4 weeks ago, and I couldn't talk for 4 days. They had me lecture for about 4 hours a day for 3 days, which is fine, but I just need to drink water occasionally.
Okay, let's thank Jerry for that presentation. And if you have a question, put up your hand so I can see it, and then I'll come around with the microphone so we can record the question as well as the answer for the question.
Well, you're okay. We've got one here.
This may seem like a silly question.
Oh, no question silly. Go ahead.
But how do they know that the bones that they found were actually all part of just one animal, chimp or animal or human? Do they have it? There's no way.
Hey, if you have a good question, you ask her. She'll probably know the answer. Excellent question. They don't know whether or not they're all from one, and that's an argument. Because I should add that to my presentation. Some of the bones were found here, some were found 50 feet away. Some were found 100 feet away. So no, they were scattered all over the place. And so therefore, oh, thank you very much. Therefore, they don't know that they're all from the same person. But again, when you're trying to prove your theory, you just say, well, we'll assume they are from the same animal, and therefore, but that's it. She must know something about this. That's why she asked that question. And that's good. That's good. So that's great.
Are there questions out there? Lucy is probably the most studied example looking for a link between apes and humans. But since Lucy's been found, there's been a few others as well. And maybe you can comment on that. Why haven't they hit the news as, and put Lucy behind us?
A couple of reasons. One is there's more problems with the newer findings, number one. Number two, Lucy's been around. There's lots of examples, lots of people talking about Lucy. Lucy's kind of well known and kind of the first of Australopithecines afarensis. And so therefore, once she gets famous, some of the other ones are much more controversial. And some people feel that those pushing the other discoveries not as ethical as they should be. So there are problems, ethical problems in what they're pushing. Again, we tend to see what we want to see. And if you believe in evolution, as a friend of mine once said, if evolution is true, there's got to be missing links. It has to be there. But most of us don't have any strong motivation for evolution to be true. Whereas evolutionists, by and large, do, because if evolution is not true, What does that mean? That means there's a creator, intelligent creator, as one professor said to me. If evolution is not true, and if God is true, I've got a problem. I may be in a place where I don't want to be. And therefore, he realizes that his faith depended upon evolution being true, because if it's not true, he knew the alternative. The alternative is God. And of course, if God is God, if the Bible is true, then I'm not doing so well. And so that's a major motivation. And another problem, too, is that all you're going to get in school, by and large, is evolution. And I'll give you a few quick examples. I did a paper on the evidence for the evolution of snakes, and there is none. I mean, I bought the books and went through them and looked at the literature, and they very clearly state, we believe snakes evolved from limbed creatures that walked on 4 legs, but we don't really have any proof of that. So we don't really know for sure where they evolved, but we believe it evolved from, 4-legged creatures. And I gave my paper to a friend of mine, a colleague, who got his PhD in herpetology. He's an expert in snakes. He did his doctoral thesis on snakes. So I thought, you would like to look at it, wouldn't you? He says, nope, I'm not going to waste my time. Why? Because evolution is true. Your paper is wrong. Could you look at it? And I'm quoting many leading paleontologists, some that you know. So, see what they have to say. I don't care what they have to say. Evolution is true. I'm not going to waste my time looking at your paper. And what do? Just look at it. I want you to critique it. You have a PhD in herpetology. I don't have a PhD in herpetology. That's not my field. I just looked at the literature. He said, I'm not looking at it. So he's a guy I worked with. So,
are there questions out there? Yeah.
Thank you. There has been soft tissue found in in numerous dinosaur bones. Has there been any attempt to find any soft tissue in the bones of Lucy or any other specimen like that?
Not that I'm aware of, but there could well be, and I hope there is. The problem is that Lucy's bones, you and I couldn't get in to see them. They're displayed in many museums, but they're copies. To get in to see the original, they have to make sure they've got to check you, and you can't get in and touch the real bones. They're too valuable. They're too important. And if I come in with an axe and start chopping them up to get some soft tissue, it's not going to happen. And so, but that is a good point, and my guess is sooner or later somebody will look for soft tissue, and I think they might find some, and that may settle this question. Some people, though, don't want it settled, and so therefore they don't want to look for soft tissue. But more and more soft tissue has been found in not only dinosaur bones, but other bones, and my guess is probably we'll find some, but again, it's destructive testing, and you've got to crush the bones to find it. And, if you've got enough dinosaur bones, they can do that. But Lucy's bones or human evolution bones, that's difficult unless you're brave enough to do that.
The other thing I found interesting was, in the museum, they show Lucy. How do they decide how much hair is on Lucy in the museum?
Yeah, a lot of artistic license. And I had a bunch of pictures which I couldn't find to show you how much license there is with Lucy. There's a lot. It's, as Mark Twain said so long ago, the evidence for evolution is a few bone fragments and a few buckets of plaster. And that is all, that's Mark Twain said that, and he was no creationist. And so therefore, that unfortunately is true. Truer than he thought, probably.
And the other thing in the museum, they show human-like feet, but there's no bones that have been found with Lucy.
Right. Many of the displays, including the one in Chicago, they show human-like feet and hands. And of course, for Lucy, they found no evidence of feet or hands. Of the really important stuff, they have no evidence of, which is interesting. All the important things they need to find to prove what they think she is, they haven't found. Now they have other Australopithecus afarensis that they have found parts of the hand bones and so on. But you don't know whether those really are the Lucy type or not. So, by the way, I should mention, I sell my books for my cost, $15 a piece or 2 for $25 for almost all of them. The other one, the bigger one, is on Amazon for $47, and I sell it for $20. So and I sent a couple boxes, and hopefully I won't run out, but I have a feeling I might because I've already sold, I think, 4 or 5 already. So if you want to buy one now. You may not get it. Or you can buy one on Amazon for $47. That's fine.
If there's no other, I don't see any other questions out there now, perhaps you could say a few words about what you're going to talk about tomorrow morning, because you're going to talk about 2 other chapters in your book, I believe.
Yeah, tomorrow morning I'll be talking about Neanderthals, and Neanderthals is another failure. Besides, if you look at the textbooks published the last 100 years, besides a chimp and a Negro and a white human, the most common in between that is Neanderthals. Neanderthal was one of the most important links between us and chimps. And now today we know that Neanderthal is your neighbor. And just show very clearly that he's just another person walked around. And when I taught at Bowling Green State University, there was this professor who was a perfect Neanderthal. Perfect Neanderthal. I wanted to go up to him and say, "Can I get a picture of you?" and show it in my PowerPoint. I never got enough courage to do that. But then when I taught at another college, one of the students' father was a professor at Bowling Green. And I mentioned that to this class, anthropology class, and she raised her hand and said, "Yeah, I know exactly who you mean. He works with my father at the university. He's a perfect Neanderthal. I mean, he would fit on the cover of National Geographic without touching up anything." And so there are some walking around that fit perfectly. But I go into detail in how critical that was for evolution. And now the consensus is clearly just your neighbor. So it's a fascinating history that I go through. So,
and then the other one is on the chimp and
the chimp.
Human, the similarity in the supposed similarity in the DNA.
And right, they claim they're 98% similar. The real number is far, far lower. But interestingly, some say 99%, 98, 99% similar. But interestingly, let's take this couple here. She's already smart, so I can give her a hard time because she knows I'll be kidding. You two are less than 1% different. 1% different. And that's true with any 2 people. You take anybody in this room, compare them, the difference between you and that other person is less than 1% difference. DNA. Right. So we were 99% similar. Now, there's some, you could quibble about that, and some people feel, well, we got some DNA, we're not sure what it does, so you can argue back and forth, but at least you're 98% well, not 98, at least you're 99% similar, and not 99.1% similar. So the differences between us and chimps are about this, they claim, about the same as the DNA differences between 2 people. And those numbers can be difficult because we still have a lot of DNA we don't know what it does. They call it junk DNA. Pretty sure almost all of it has a use now, but there's some we're not sure. You know, it's 3 billion base pairs. That's 6 billion DNAs. That's a lot, and you work with that all day, as I did when I was at the medical school, and you realize that we have a lot to learn still in trying to figure out what the DNA does. A lot of it's spacers. You need spacers at places. Like when you have a fruit, you have a place where the stem comes out, and therefore you don't have a totally round fruit. You've got a place that's not round because that's where the stem comes out. So we have connecting points like centromeres, and therefore we don't have genes that have a function except to hold 2 chromosomes together, the centromere. Hopefully well, I guess there's, go ahead.
Yeah.
Back there.
Question back here. And if you want to find out how different they were, you got to come tomorrow morning to the mini conference.
So it seems to me now that we're talking about DNA that the structure of the DNA molecule in and of itself is sufficient proof to prove that evolution is impossible. Because how could something so complex? Some of your associates I've heard say there's as many as 3 billion bits of information stored in a DNA cell. How could that happen by accident? It's not possible mathematically.
That's true, and we're in an interesting position that we have all the facts, we have all the evidence, but we're not allowed to present our worldview in the schools. And I've taught at secular colleges for 41 years. I had the least problem at the medical school, and I had the greatest problem at the research universities. And they're just adamant in this being true. And over, I would point out this stuff to them, and they would say, well, we'll figure it out. I mean, Darwin only lived 150 years ago, and we're still figuring things out. I mean, do you expect us to answer everything in 150 years? Hey, give us another 150 years, and we'll figure it all out. That's the response they get. They have a belief, and that belief is supported by the schools and the literature and the films and National Geographic and all over the place, and so therefore it's hard for us to get a word in edgewise, so to speak. I can mention I was a evolutionist one time. Why did I change? I changed because of the evidence. A lot of people, they have a road to Damascus conversion experience. Well, I didn't really have that. I was convinced, as many other, I've got a whole book out there which talk about this, many of us are convinced that evolution is not true by the evidence. And that's why I stress, wherever I go, that God has revealed himself through his word, but also through his creation. And therefore, when we study his creation, when we study biology and anatomy, we can see God written all over the genome as well as all over the natural world. And that's what convinced me, and that's what convinced a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there that became Christians not because of a road to Damascus conversion, but because of their research in science. And so I stress, because to me that's important, although that's obviously a lot of people don't agree with that. And I know my wife says, no, I just study the Bible. She reads the Bible every day carefully, and I do too, but on the other hand, I see evidence of God in the creation, and my wife doesn't tend to see it as vividly as I do. Yeah, sunsets are beautiful and so on, but get into God's Word, which is important, of course. But on the other hand, spend some time in God's creation. I have a friend of mine who is what do you call a person who's into trees and forests and so on? A ranger, but anyways, he said he's closest to God, but he says he's closest to God in a forest when he sees the tall trees and how the canopy goes up. And you know why churches are designed the way they are? There are these spires that go up, and they go up like this. They're designed to imitate a forest, because many people are closest to God in a natural environment like a forest, or watching the sunset, or watching the clouds travel by, or other things. So,
okay. Well, thank you, Jerry. And Jerry will be on the back table there. He'll, if you have some more questions, you'll have time to do it. Thank you, Jerry.
And if you want me to, I'll sign my books. A couple of months ago, I had someone bought my book. I signed it, and they sold it on eBay for $99. So I'm not sure whether I was insulted or flattered, but I guess I'll take it as a flattery. But I'll pick them up now because I'm running out. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you. A few closing comments. I would argue that if Darwin were alive today, he would see this evidence and agree that his theory of evolution does not work. Remember, we have a lot more information today about creation than Darwin had available. I mean, we have DNA and the structure of the molecules and all that. Darwin didn't have that. And so anyway, tomorrow morning in Snohomish, Jerry will be there. He's going to give 2 lectures, and we'll have some books available, and his books available as well, and some refreshments and coffee, of course. And then in the evening, Saturday evening. I know there's not a whole lot of youth here, but if you have youth that you know, invite them to the youth night out. Jerry's going to be speaking on a different topic, really about animals and what they tell us about creation. And that's in Calvary Chapel, Lake Stevens on Highway 9. All the details, of course, are on the back table and also on our website. So in conclusion, remember I told you about all the things that we have on our website. Take a little bit of time and look at that website, look at the resources and see what we have available. There's a lot out there. There's a whole bunch of documents on the back table, flyers and more information about the courses that Mike Riddle gives as well. If you have an interest in that, or you know somebody that has an interest, take advantage of that. I didn't pass any sign-up sheets around, but there is a sign-up sheet on the back table. If you're not on our mailing list yet, feel free to add your name and email address there, and you'll be informed. Juan Valdez was here in February. He had this book, the new Answers book from Reasons for Hope. The title was a very strange title, Did Jesus Commit Suicide? But what's in there really is the answer to 28 of the most common questions that youth ask. And they have done surveys at summer camps and come up with those 28 questions. And they have very short, concise biblical answers. And we still have some of his books available there as well. And of course, Bergman's books back there. You want to look at that. And just to remind you, we do support this ministry with through donations, and there are donation boxes on the back, or you can donate online as well. On the slide you see here, our speaker for next month is Mark Champney. He's been here before. Turns out he is an ex-Mormon, and he's very busy in evangelization in Utah as a result of that. But he's going to be speaking on a very different topic, and that's about this. What's the importance of the second law of thermodynamics? Why is that so important? Because that proves creation. There is an origin of the universe. There is an origin of the earth, and he's going to explain that in a layman's language. So don't worry about the science. He's not a scientist, but he explains it very, very well. So let me just close in a word of prayer and be dismissed. Father, we come to you just to thank you for this time. We thank you for Jerry and all the information he has provided here in his talks, and also the information he has available in his books that are available. And we just pray that you would just continue to bless his ministry here and through the remaining 2 days that he's here as well. And we just thank you for the evidence that you have provided for us, for the truth of your word in creation. We thank you for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.